I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them talk, so I'm letting them talk. Gotta keep quiet, maneuver in silence to let them in, talk up their body, another one body, that's just how it go. I got some secrets, I'm shaking the game so they stay on their toes. Stay in your lane, how to stay on the go. I can play with the pros and act like a rookie, so they overlook me. They're not develop or get none of their nose, none of them cold. They just got lucky, but never adapt. So once in a wonder if it's coming to blows, my pennies putting it close.
Hello there, Jen. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, great to be here. Just the weather's been crazy. Good reintroduction back to Florida. It's been great.
Yes. So welcome everyone. Our guest tonight is Miss Jen Spees, and we're excited to have her here tonight. And so Jen, startup is all about giving founders and aspiring founders or future founders an opportunity to network on a weekly basis every Thursday. And then we also like to do what you and I are doing now is kind of help the founders learn some of the best practices for building their MVP and growing their startup. And I feel, the audience, we're really blessed, to have a person with your experience right here in Pensacola sharing some of your knowledge here. And I want to thank Jonathan Kurtz for introducing us. And he was all excited when he told me about you. And so I immediately reached out to you and you said yes.
Yeah, of course. Like I was saying, I'm a dime a dozen in terms of career experience in Silicon Valley, but hopefully my experience is interesting and it inspires people to sort of understand the way we think about building businesses and new products, and also just really reinforce that you don't need to be in Silicon Valley to do that.
Right. I agree 100%. And so my hypothesis is that there are a lot of people out there in Northwest Florida, here in Pensacola, here in Escambia County, walking around with ideas in their head, but they don't have a clue how to turn those ideas into reality. And so,
yes, and we will get into that because I strongly believe that everyone has had billion-dollar business ideas, and if not $1 billion, tons of great business ideas. And we'll talk a little bit about how to go from that idea that you're really excited about and thinking about all the time to actually validating it and turning it into something more.
Yes, and so I think one of the challenges that I've noticed since we started the Startup on the Blocks is helping people understand that there's an ecosystem, of support, to help you turn that idea into a product or service. And so just trying to increase that awareness of that as well.
Yeah, completely. I think there are a lot of people in Pensacola with experience as company founders in technology, in different industries, and a lot of them are just really open with their time and happy to share their experience. So it's a great city and region to start something in as well.
Right. Yeah. It's literally unbelievable. And sometimes I'm excited about Pensacola, and I got a good start here with my startup, and and believe it or not, I decided to do a startup when they Innovation Coast had a pitch competition, a business plan competition, and I think first prize was $100,000 and second prize was 50, third prize
That's
was,
awesome.
and that was back in 2014, believe it or not.
Yeah, that's great.
So can you believe they've been doing stuff like that here in Pensacola?
I think it's great. So I grew up in Pensacola. All my family's here. I left when I was 18 to go out to college at Stanford and Silicon Valley, and since then have been living mostly in the Bay Area, also a little bit in Boston and London. But like over the years, kept coming back to Pensacola, a couple of times a year, as much as I could, to see my parents and grandparents. And just you can feel the town, growing and developing, and so much happening here over the years. And so it's so exciting to finally move back and to see all the change that's happened in the town. It's awesome.
Yes. And I thought I saw on LinkedIn that you had spent some time over in Africa or something like that.
Yeah, I have. And yeah, it's a long story, and we can get into it. But I think the short version is I was a political science major in college, and I started out writing my thesis about international justice in Uganda, because I was dead set on being a lawyer. And everyone knows the plans you have in college change. So of course that didn't happen. But I spent a lot of time living and researching in East Africa. And I went to work at Google in 2009 as a paralegal, which is sort of the stepping stone before law school, and then realized didn't want to do law school. And I had all this experience in East Africa, and there was a tiny team at Google that was trying to think through how can we build the software product to help teachers in East Africa. And the company has really changed since then, but back in the day, there weren't teams on the ground there. A lot of the engineers building these products were from California. And so it really, I sort of got drawn into the product because I was really interested in the region. And then I had this expertise to sort of help them think about, hey, you can't ask people what high school did they go to when they're signing up, because they don't call it high school. Like that's an irrelevant question for users in Rwanda. And that was sort of my first little exposure to thinking about building products for people outside of the US and in different markets. And it's been something I've really focused on throughout my career, and have kept going back to the region, and definitely holds a special place in my heart.
Yes, that's great. And so I also noticed you had one of your LinkedIn posts, you had said something about you had participated, a part of the team that developed the new Google Pay app.
Yeah. This is my current gig at Google. So it's another thing I enjoy about working at a big company. There's just like so many different opportunities and teams. But after working at MBU, which is Google's next billion users, it's like the part of Google that's building products for users in markets that aren't the US and Europe, but are really where the next big user growth is coming from. And since then, I've been going over to Google Pay. And that's another really interesting challenge that I think is similar to a lot of the themes in this talk, where, we're sort of trying to go from 0 to 1 and grow a new app and find our initial users and figure out what works and what doesn't. And so I love those challenges. I think throughout my career, that's been another common thread of going from that 0 to 1 stage and that idea, initial MVP, to something that's growing and that's more stable and that's scaling. I really love that process.
Well, I was glad I found that link, because I had Google Pay on my Android phone, but I didn't have it on my iPhone.
There you go. We got a new user today.
And so I decided to install it on there. And then I started looking at the video that you posted, and I said, I didn't know Google Pay could do all that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's lots of great features coming. Yeah. So glad to hear that you're using it.
Oh yeah. So like I registered for KuKua Institute to get a merchant account on there, and it took 2 seconds almost, and so enabling people to do transactions with the organization, that's pretty neat capability.
Nice.
Yes.
Well, send us all the feedback, good and bad. We're
Okay.
excited for it.
All right. Okay. All righty. Well, I'm glad, we got a chance to kind of so the audience could get to know you a little bit and just, yeah. And so, I think, like, I'll just go ahead and let you get started on your presentation. And so are you do you want to answer questions during the presentation or do you want to
Either way, we can maybe save just some time for longer questions and discussions at the end. And, feel free to like jot your question down. And if I don't cover it, we can do them at the end if that works.
Yeah. That's probably the best way to do it. And then, so for the audience, there is a question and answer tab. So just post your questions in there, and we'll keep an eye on that. And for the folks out on Facebook, you can post your questions in the comment, and we'll try to grab those as well. All righty. Well, I'll let you get your screen set up to share your screen again, and then once you get that set up, I'll fade off and let you get started.
Good stuff. Yeah, and thanks again for having me.
There you go. You're welcome.
Cool. Can you guys see my screen? I think so. So this talk is all about how to go from that initial idea and the excitement you might have with this idea to building a business, validating that idea, and really hitting that next wave of growth. And these are not, academic rules or things that are set in stone. These are really just things that come from personal experience over the 15 years or so that I spent in Silicon Valley working for these companies. So take from it what you want, and hopefully it's helpful and helps you think about some of these things in a new way. What I'm really going to do in this presentation is just share my experience from Silicon Valley and hopefully help you think about growing ideas from the seed stage to something bigger and more scalable, and inspire you to jump in and take that leap as a founder. And I'm really breaking this down to 3 different stages. So the first stage is that idea stage, when you have a great idea that is keeping you up at night and that you're constantly thinking about. We'll talk a little bit about a minimum viable product and how to take that idea into something you can hold in your hands, get in front of users or customers. And then lastly, how to go from that beta stage to a growing company and something that could really scale. We talked a little bit about my background. I'm from Pensacola, proud Pensacola High School graduate. Go PHS Tigers. I left Pensacola when I was 18 to go to Stanford. I did not major in anything technical. I had an English and international relations background. But being in Silicon Valley, I went to work for Google right after college, at first as a paralegal, and sort of quickly started working with engineers on some of their next billion users products that were based in East Africa. And as I was telling Lloyd, that was really the beginning of my exposure to what it was like to work with engineers and to do market research and test a software product, and what it really looks like to go from an idea to a software product that people are using in the real world. I got an MBA after spending some time at Google, and then went to work for Facebook in London, where I worked in their ads business and their emerging markets business to really start to build out businesses for Facebook, both in countries like regions like Africa and the Middle East, as well as some of their video ads businesses and their new formats like stories. And then I came back to Google. So I boomeranged back to Google about 2 years ago, and have been in Silicon Valley for the last 4 years, and moved to Pensacola recently about 2 months ago due to remote work and some of the sort of COVID related trends that were happening. And I'm really excited to be home. I have 2 young kids that you can see in this photo, and we are close to my parents, which is great when you have young kids. So I've just really enjoyed being back in town. And the 6 key takeaways, if you're taking notes, are one that if you have a great idea, that's the most important first step, but validating that idea is more important. And you should always be validating. And we'll get into some of the best practices and tips for how you can get feedback on your idea and bake that feedback in as quick as possible. When we think about your minimum viable product in that stage, It is great if you are failing or if you're surprised by what you're learning. And we'll talk a little bit about that sort of feedback, meaning that you're doing it right. I think this is a great lesson. I think about it a lot, which is you can have the best strategy in the world, but the most important thing is execution. And, Mark Zuckerberg said this at Facebook, and I thought it was really spot on, which is execution is more important than strategy. We will also go into briefly going from launch to scale and how that can be really difficult. And it's never just a straight hockey stick of growth in terms of your users or your revenue. There are peaks and valleys and moments where you will doubt yourself. And then a little bit about just having how to frame that and have the right attitude through the ups and downs of being a founder. So idea stage, you have an idea, now what? One of the sort of ongoing debates that venture capitalists have in Silicon Valley is, if you can have the best product, the best market, or the best people, which would you pick? And, obviously you can't build a successful business, if you don't have all three of these things. They're all important. But if you could only have one, a product that's like technically superior, it's better than everything else out there. Maybe you could have a great market. You just have, customers are lining up to buy your product. Or you have a team of people who are working in the business who have experience doing this. They're a great motivated team of people. Which one would you choose? There's not a right answer, but surprisingly, there is sort of a consensus among people in Silicon Valley. And surprise, it's not the product. So, I think history is littered with examples of products that have actually been superior, that have lost the sort of market wars. So even the keyboard you're using, that's a famous example of a product that is not as good as its competitors were, but it actually won the race to the market despite being inferior. Products also change. So the product you start out with, it's probably not the product that you're going to take to market or eventually scale with. Market. Having a good market is really important, but there are tons of businesses out there as well that have made new markets. So if you think about Airbnb and Uber and these companies that were initially sort of laughed out of the venture capitalist room for describing these crazy futures where, people are, getting strangers to pick them up in their car. Some of the businesses have created new markets. And the consensus is generally that people are some of the most important of these three that you can invest in. And if you think about when you're starting out with an idea, there are going to be tons of things out of your control, and the market could change. The product is probably going to evolve as you get new data. But a great team of people and a great founder can really control some of the execution and the pivots and the strategy shifts that are inevitably going to happen. So good to keep in mind as you think about your own founding journey and assembling a team of people around you in the beginning. And I think, because of that dynamic, and if you take one thing away from this talk, it's really that once you have that idea, the worst thing you can do is to just, go into a closet or go into isolation and work on your idea without any feedback for a long time and then launch it. And so in Silicon Valley, if you go out to a cocktail party, a lot of times people will tell you that they're working on an idea that's in stealth mode. So that means it's a secret and they can't really talk about what it is. And there are plenty of examples where that's probably a good idea to be in stealth mode. But I sort of personally always laugh at it because I think it's not the best idea. I really firmly believe that great ideas are a dime a dozen. And everyone listening to this talk has had great business ideas, probably, billion-dollar business ideas. And when you sort of don't talk to people at cocktail parties about your idea and get their reaction, get their feedback, you're sort of missing a chance to validate your idea, to get a reaction, to start to test the waters of some of your ideas. And so please take away, always be validating. If you have an idea, talk to people about it, get their feedback. And on the right here, you can just see some of the examples in Silicon Valley of, I think, companies that were secretive or were in stealth mode for a while, and then they launched and they flopped. And people started to wonder, why wasn't there customer feedback when they were developing the product earlier? And here are just some examples of what good validation looks like when you're in this really exciting idea stage. And the first one is exactly that sort of cocktail party reaction that I just described. So pitch your idea to family and to friends. Pitch it to people you barely know who won't just be nice to you and say it's a great idea. What I've noticed when I've done this is that the way I describe an idea the first time, it really evolves by the time I get to the 40th time that I'm describing the idea, because you sort of understand what resonates with people, you find better ways to describe something, and you really sharpen the way that you can describe an idea and sell it to someone just by having to do it over and over. Another thing you can do if you have an idea you're excited about is talk to industry experts. So, call someone who has been in the industry that your idea has to do with and just see what they think. See if they know of any competitors doing something similar. Get their take on if it's a good idea or not. Most people are pretty open to just being approached and asking if they want to get coffee. And, I think in Pensacola and beyond, there's this great community of business leaders that would give feedback if you have an idea and you want to get their reaction. The other one is check out the competition. So if there is a business or a product that's doing something similar to your idea, go use it, go check it out, try to be a customer and try to form a pretty strong opinion about what you like about it, what you don't like about it, how your product could be better or worse. That's a form of market research that is great to do at this stage. And, lastly, in your conversations with industry experts and with people, what you're really trying to circle around is, it's one thing to have someone tell you that you have a great idea, but would they buy it? Would they spend their time on it if they're users? Trying to figure out if someone would pay for this product or service is really the $1 million question at this stage. And I think the stage is really fun. It's a lot of sort of qualitative research and on the ground research. And there's, you don't need to invest any money in your idea at this point. You can just do this all in your free time even. And it's a fun way to validate ideas and get feedback quickly. The next stage is what I'll refer to as MVP stage. So minimum viable product is a term that we use in Silicon Valley to describe what is the thing that you can make, that you can get out there in front of your customers or users with the least amount of resources so that you can really quickly get feedback and continue to iterate on what you started developing. And, as I said, at this stage, you should be failing, you should be surprised at what you're learning and, really taking advantage of the minimum viable product stage to be pivoting and changing, some of your initial hypotheses that you had about the business. And, this product lets you get out there in front of users or customers, and you should be surprised. I think there are some amazing businesses that were built on quote unquote failure products that did not turn out the way the founders, thought they were investing. So Post-its came from an industrial strength adhesive compound that 3M was trying to develop. Facebook Live was originally a celebrity video platform that as the team started working and building it, they realized that this had a much more interesting application doing something like Facebook Live than what they had set out to do. And Twitter originally was a podcasting service. And here you can see, I think this is one of the really early days of what the Google search engine looked like. 25 million pages, soon to be much bigger. Just like a great example of trying to get your product out there or your business out there as soon as possible to get feedback, to get usage data, and going from there. So don't wait until it's perfect. Try to get it out there in the world. And here are just some tips for what a good MVP stage looks like. And the number one thing you can do is don't trust your gut and try to use data as much as possible. So create surveys for your users or customers. Look at usage or purchase data. Experiment a ton. Try different features. Try different price points. And look at what the data tells you as much as you can. And what you should be doing when you look at that data is iterating as much as possible. So taking the feedback that you're starting to get from surveys, from customers, from people, and changing the product and seeing if it becomes more compelling, more sticky, more like something that people want to purchase based on the iterations that you're making. And this feedback loop, the faster you can do it, the better your product will get, the more you can sell it, and the more you'll be ready to really grow it once you feel like you've got something more baked. I think if you get stuck, advice that I've gotten before that was really helpful is zoom out on the problem you're trying to solve. So a lot of times people will take a product or a business out to market and it's not sticking. And it's, they've done the surveys, they've done the research, but there's not really a clear answer on why people aren't buying it or using it. And I think continuing to try to focus on what's the problem that you're trying to solve for people. Why is it a problem? Who is it a problem for? Sort of taking that step back, asking why, zooming out can really help you focus on the problem that is real that you're trying to solve rather than the solution that you think is perfect yet no one's using. So, don't be afraid to zoom out and ask those questions when things aren't sticking. And then lastly, doubling down when you find product market fit and, your actual customers or users may be different than the ones that you sought out to get initially. I worked on a product at Facebook that we initially built for large advertisers like the Coca-Colas and the Pepsis of the world. It was a video creator in emerging markets. And what we found when we launched it was our biggest customer, our biggest user segment were small businesses based in the US. So these are, completely different customer segments. And we did a lot of research around why they were using it, what problems it was solving. And we started realizing that it enabled small businesses in the US to create video ads really easily, which is a huge pain point if you're a small business. And we started actually thinking about this segment and investing in it and doubling down on them because we could see that this product was creating a lot of value for them. And so even if it's surprising who your customers are or even the problems that you're successfully solving, when you find that spark of customers and users being excited about what you're building and you meeting their needs, really double down, do more research, try to center the product around that user need and go from there. Execution and strategy. Facebook, the halls of Facebook were filled with posters that border on propaganda, but were also inspiring. And this is one of them, Proceed and Be Bold. They were all over the walls. I've taken some home. And it's something I keep in mind when I think about, what do you do when you find that initial, customer who's excited about your product, who wants to pay you for it? How do you go from having sort of a smaller set of customers to something bigger and really planning out your strategy once you have a product? I think with strategy, there's a lot of business school books out there. There's a lot of different strategies. There's really no one size fits all, and it'll completely vary on your business and your industry. And a lot of different strategies can be successful. So you really think deeply about your market and the opportunity. And all of these have led to successful businesses. So you might have a business or a product that's really just 10x better than everything out there on the market. Things like Gmail and iPhones and an app like Shazam. They were just demonstrably better than what else was out there when they first launched. You could also just have the right product at the right time in the right market. So when Instagram launched, everyone in the US had a mobile phone. A large number of people, it was exploding in growth. And this app comes along that helps you take great photos and share them. And so the timing of that app was great. And I think I'm trying to include some Pensacola examples. The Blue Wahoos Stadium may not have been a great business 30 years ago, but coming into the town where Pensacola was in this period of growth and people are moving to the region and ready to support a local baseball team, really the right time to launch a business like this. There's also examples of companies that have gone into existing markets and have just moved faster than the bigger businesses and disrupted them by building a better product. If you think about TikTok, there's no reason that Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram could have developed what TikTok made, but this sort of smaller, more nimble company has come in and created this product that has a lot of value for users. You can also create a new market like we talked about with Netflix or Airbnb or Uber, or something that just doesn't exist yet today. And then, what I've done in my career thinking about these next billion user markets, I think you see happening in Pensacola a little, is take known consumer trends to markets where, they may not be available to consumers. So if you look at a company like Jumia, which is an Amazon-like company that serves Nigeria and Kenya and some other African markets. That's taking something that consumers love, which is online shopping, and bringing it to people who don't have it yet. And Ride Society downtown, even if you think about SoulCycle just being a huge consumer trend in New York and in other markets in the US, this is something that is really tapping into a national consumer trend and bringing it to a market that doesn't have it yet. And so that's a little bit on strategy, but I think the focus on strategy is actually less important because I believe that execution is more important than strategy. And so in business school, you just learn about so many companies that were full of really smart people who had amazing strategies that look great on paper that completely failed. I think Google Plus is an example that's cited a lot in academic papers. Quibi, which was supposed to be this video platform that had hundreds of millions of dollars and great people behind, that launched and failed spectacularly in the past year. If you think about Barnes & Noble's Nook, there's just history is littered with companies who have spent a lot of money, had great people working on products and new businesses that have failed. And so the best strategy can go off the rails in the real world. And I think getting data, getting feedback as early as possible, and executing really well is the secret sauce here. And so as you think about good execution, once you have your initial strategy, which hopefully will look great, is getting data as soon as you can, validating it as soon as possible, changing your product constantly based on what you're learning and the inputs that you're getting from people to find that initial product market fit and that set of users or customers that are really excited about your product and you're solving a problem for them. And then doubling down regardless of what you set out to do. So done is better than perfect. This is another one of the posters that was hanging around Facebook that I think is just so true. Getting something out there is much more important than waiting till you think it's perfect. And then lastly, scaling. And so, maybe once you have this product, that you have the initial set of customers, growth very rarely just looks like a straight, easy line to that, multi-million-dollar business that you're hoping to build. And I think this chart is funny because you see a peak of inflated expectations, a slope of enlightenment. There's usually always at least one severe drop between your initial launch and then, the steady growth that you're hoping for. And in every successful product that I've worked on, products now that are held up within Facebook and Google as these are amazing, billion user products, there was periods where we debated internally, maybe we should shut this down because we're not seeing the kind of growth that we initially expected. And so, having that, I think, grit and determination to weather these growth bumps that will inevitably happen after your launch is important. And just keeping in mind that growth for businesses and for products, it's almost never a straight hockey stick. And so this is in Silicon Valley sort of referred to as the valley of death, where you're trying to get to your next funding round. And even successful businesses hit this period of growth where your product's meandering along and you're sort of left thinking, what's next? Should I shut this down? My advice for this is, once you have initial traction, keep obsessing about your customers and the data. You may need to keep pivoting the product. This headline that you see here is a really famous example of, Facebook made one of their biggest pivots of all time shortly after their IPO, when they saw a ton of their users were on mobile devices instead of desktop computers. And they realized, our app isn't very good on mobile. We need to have more engineers building for iPhones and Android phones. And they really pivoted the whole company in less than a year to start building a great mobile app because it was critical to the survival of the company. And so even if you are successful, you're going to need to continue to obsess about data, pivot, change the company. And, one thing I've learned in this stage is that once you find success, it's likely you're not going to be asking yourself, is this a good idea to do for the business? Or is this a good next feature to build or a next product line? Because you'll likely have a bunch of good ideas and it becomes more about prioritization. And so being able to think through, is this the absolute best idea, best return on investment, best thing that I could be spending my precious time on right now. And we ran into this a lot at both Google and Facebook, where there are a ton of ideas that were great ideas and things that we could spend our time working on, but they maybe would be less of a priority of something more critical we could do for the business. So always trying to have that lens of prioritization, execution, and data, and really focusing on customer feedback will sort of hopefully get you through this slope and back onto the growth line. Lastly, I think the media loves to, especially in Silicon Valley, paint this picture of tech giants competing against each other and what are the competitors doing. And all of the people that I've worked with and really learned under have really taught me that don't overly obsess about what your competition is doing. Pay attention to it, don't ignore it, but really focus on your customers, focus on your business, focus on your data, and don't just chase the competition, which I think is great advice. And lastly, I'll end it here, and we can have questions. And I think this is easier said than done. But I was reading a book that was all about how to have great stories and great narration. And the point that this book made was that the key to any great novel that you'll ever read or any story is a sense of tension or struggle or quest. And the example they gave to illustrate this was, imagine that someone pitched you this story. The boy meets girl, boy asks girl to marry him, girl says yes, end of story. It sounds like sort of an incredibly boring book to read. There's zero surprise, there's zero tension, there's zero struggle. And I think it was a funny point and something that is true in life, and especially true in a founder's life and a business owner's life. I often want my plans and my strategy to go exactly to plan and to hit all of my revenue goals and to not have surprises about who I think my customers are. But the reality is that things are messy. There will be a struggle. And that's what makes, I think, founding a business interesting, because you learn and you grow. And so just keeping that perspective in mind, enjoying the ups and downs. I think, all of you guys are taking the right step being here, being at this networking session. And I really look forward to seeing some of the ideas and MVPs and businesses that come out of this program. And yeah, I think we can do questions next, but this is my email and LinkedIn. I'd love to stay in touch with everyone here. Please reach out after this talk.
Fantastic. That was really powerful, Jen. And and I think a lot of founders take a lot of stuff for granted, and they don't realize that, there is a method to the madness. Yes. And so, I really appreciate you leading us through that. I see Natalie has a question, and I'm not sure how this fits with your talk. It says, how do you become a super user at Google? And I don't even know what that means, to be honest with you.
Super user.
Yes.
I feel like I entered if it's more about my career, I got involved as a product manager at Google pretty slowly. So I started working with engineers and teams that were building in the space that I had experience in. And I realized I really liked doing, my job title was product manager. And so it's maybe similar to a founder in that I don't code, but I work with engineers and designers and salespeople and legal people and lead a team of people around me to build products and launch things and grow things. And I'm happy to share resources about how to get involved in that line of work. And I like that job because you get to wear many hats, similar to being a founder, and no day is the same. But there are many different paths into product management.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers your question, Natalie. You can ask another one if it doesn't. And so Pete Nowak, he's basically saying that they're still working on product market fit, but he's saying, how do you know when you have a winner? What what is some advice you would how to get through it to that product market fit?
Yeah, I would, continue to go back to the data and try to find pockets of customers or users that are using your product, and then trying to get to why and figure out if that why is a segment of users that's big enough to really scale. And so, some examples of this is I've worked on some products that had a really small group of users, but they were obsessed with the product, and we were really excited about it. We're like, oh, we have product market fit for these users. And when we started asking why they were using it, what value the product had, we started to realize it was because there were some weird loopholes in our product that weren't going to be the things that we really invested in. We were going to shut these features down. And so that's sort of a way that you can use data to confirm or scratch off a customer segment that you think you have. Other times you might find, similar to these small business customers that we found at Facebook, might be a customer that you didn't even think that you were courting or didn't set out to win as a customer. But as you start to ask, well, why are you using it? What value does it get? You actually realize, hey, there's nothing like our product on the market for these people. How big is this market? How many other people could we solve this problem for if we actually tried to go after them? So I would say, like, finding those little pockets of spark where customers or users are enjoying your product, and then asking why and trying to really get to the why is how I've approached it in my career.
So how would you actually really describe product market fit for those in the audience who still may have some questions about it?
Yeah, I think it's I would say if you see product market fit, you are solving a problem for a real user or customer, which is going to result in someone, signing up for your app, using your product, paying you money. You want, you don't want just people telling you it's a good idea in a survey. You actually want to see users using your product, people paying you money, people subscribing, sort of whatever that key metric that you've defined is. You want to see enough users that you can categorize them in a segment. So, if it's a business or a sort of in-person retail store, who are the types of people going into your store? Like, can you segment them into different customers that you can start to build offerings around? And so the more you can try to draw patterns around people using your business or your products, and then really dive deep into who is this segment, what do they need, what can I offer to them that they would pay me for or use my product more for, I think the more you can start to really paint that business hypothesis to grow your product and to get deeper into product market fit.
Yeah, that sounds. It made me think that it's more like this idea you're actually building something that people desperately needs.
Yeah, and you hear there's all these anecdotes about at Amazon. I've never worked at Amazon, but they used to leave a chair open in every meeting for the customer, and they try to really have this culture of obsessing about the customer, which I think is a great corporate value to really, a lot of I think businesses don't know who their customers are, which is a big mistake. And so where you can really start is trying to understand who your customers and users are and really obsess over them, try to, segment them, try to understand why they're using your product, what value they see, and build more value on top of that based on what you're hearing. Okay.
So let's see what else we have here. Yeah, I was intrigued, by your slide that had to do with the team of the people winning out over the product, and I think that's maybe something that may be hard to understand, for some founders.
Yeah, and this is, like I said, I think all of these things are important. So if you're thinking about starting a company, you need a great product. You need to have really thought about your market and find the right market. And you need a great team of people. But in this sort of theoretical debate that goes on in Silicon Valley, I do agree that the most important thing, especially at the idea phase where your products are going to change, the market may not even exist yet, or the dynamics of the market may shift.
Yes.
The main thing that you would want to bet on as a venture capitalist is the people. And so I think that's why, as a founder, I actually find this sort of encouraging, because it means that like all of this is in your control, and you can control the execution and the strategy. And clearly there's a ton of talent for founders in Pensacola, and everyone on this call, it would be a great founder. And so I think it's true for founders, and then it's also really true for sort of the initial co-founders or initial team of people that you build around you for the business. So just making sure that you're being, I think, really careful with that first hire, first group of people, and assembling the right team is really important in the early stages.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I would definitely agree. And in my startup, that's part of what my biggest challenge, was. I still struggle with it now, because you have to be able to execute, and that team is what allows you to do that. And your customers want to know you have the ability to execute. The investors want to know you have the ability to execute. So so I definitely resonate with that.
Mark Zuckerberg used to say he would only hire people he would work for, as he would report to if they were going to be his manager, which I think has been true when I've done hiring as well. You want people you can learn from. You want people that could be your manager and that you have this really collaborative relationship with. And having that team of great people is really the secret sauce for a lot of great companies.
Yeah, and another thing that I see here a lot is that the founders are building stuff without the right amount of validation on what they're building. So they're spending money and maybe not having even validate that the customer really wants the product yet.
Yeah, and I think that's what I really like about this stage, the validation stage, is that you actually don't need to really invest anything at this stage. You could spend a couple of months doing all of these things and doing really deep research without spending anything. And I've done this a lot of different times in my career. Maybe you're spending money to take someone out to coffee, or you're spending money to talk to people here and there, but you don't need to, and you really shouldn't go out and invest in a business in the early stage or in equipment. And so I think that's another thing that I love about the startup ecosystem and being a founder, is a lot of it can be really scrappy. And some of the biggest businesses out there got started super scrappily, and in some ways it, I think, makes everything run better when things have to be really lean in the beginning.
Yes, and what I noticed is when we initiated our first pitch competition for Startup on the Blocks, a lot of people didn't want to apply anything because they thought their product had to be built or whatever already, and so and they're saying, well, I'm just not ready yet, and so it's so sometimes it's a challenge to tell them that, encourage them to come on into the ecosystem and get the help, and build a good foundation for your product.
Yeah, and even I wasn't familiar with Silicon Valley before moving out there, and I've been surprised hearing some of these companies like Stitch Fitch, which is it's $1 billion sort of clothing business, got initial funding just through I think like survey data that she had done. And if you look at some of these companies that are now $1 billion businesses, and you see what did the founders have when they got their first $1 million, a lot of it was sort of these initial surveys that they had done, or maybe they were in the MVP stage and they had run a beta test, but it wasn't a real product yet. They had just gotten some interesting data. That's really, I think, the level that becomes interesting to a lot of investors, where you've done the research, you have data that is really confirming your hypothesis, or you've built a hypothesis around the initial data, and then you need money for a specific reason, to scale the business, to grow, to make your first hire. I think what I've seen with friends who are founders or others is it's, raising money is one thing, but still being in business in 18 to 24 months is the real hard part. And so when you think about raising money or taking that money, going through that sort of like the valley of death that we talked about, and going from that initial data and maybe some initial product market fit to really a bigger business that can continue to grow is incredibly difficult, and also sort of part of the fun as well.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So we got a couple more questions here from Quinn. He says, can Google Pay be integrated into a platform as an escrow account?
Ooh, that's a good question. I am not sure. They are rolling out new features constantly. I don't know about that one specifically, so I'll have to get back to you. Not that I'm aware of, but I'll do some research.
And I would be willing to bet that there's some solutions out there for escrowing, money for, as it relates to startups. So I think that's something that definitely can be searched, because that escrow thing comes up, not a lot, but I think it's somebody's probably has something out there that you maybe with an API that you can integrate into your solution.
Yeah, I've seen, I agree. It must exist, because I've seen, I know companies that do shipping. So UShip is one of them, have escrow accounts where they hold money from people and then they release it to shippers. Mm-hmm. But good question. I'm sure we'll find a solution.
Yes, that's right. And then Peter has another question. Does Google have resources to help ask customers the right question? What resource is best for this?
Yeah, I think one of them that I've used before is Google Surveys. And so when you're just building surveys to talk to people, that's one. There are analytics tools that are out there that Google provides, as well as other companies. I haven't used those, and it'll sort of depend on what your business is. And I think another interesting way that I've seen people validate hypotheses is with ads on Google and on Facebook. And so I've actually seen people, make different ads for different businesses they wanted to run, or products, and then look at, which ones were getting more clicks. And you can actually break down of the people who clicked on your ads, what's the demographic breakdown, where do they live? And so this is sort of a tool to get really sort of cheap customer research about who might be interested in your idea. But yeah, those are the two that come to mind. And I'm sure there are others based on the type of business or the product. Yeah,
and I'm not sure, but I remember, so I tell all our startup folks to enroll in startupschool.org. And if that question is related to validation, I think in the startup school, there's definitely a lesson on what types of questions to ask. I remember that from the Future Founders course, which is actually part of the startup school course. So definitely go take another look at that to make sure if you're talking about the validation stuff. Yeah. So let's see if we see any more questions here. I'm strolling through and I don't see any. So we still got a little bit more time. So if you've got some questions, and I don't see any on Facebook either, but I think your 6 lessons learned, they seem to correlate a lot with the lean startup methodology, failing fast, validation with the customer. It seems to be a lot of and so, and what I've noticed too is that a lot of the successful entrepreneurs here, that didn't really go through the startup approach, they find that hard to believe that they'd have to follow something different than what they've already used to be successful in the startup world. But how, you got any opinions on that?
Yeah, and I think, like I said, there's not, if there were a manual for creating successful businesses, there'd probably be like a lot more millionaires walking around. And so there's not a one size fits all approach.
Yes.
I think what I've seen successful founders, and hopefully what came across in this talk, is that a lot of these people are doers, and
Yes.
maybe they don't think of themselves as following some sort of system or rubric or rules, but they got their product or business out there, and they're like executing and getting feedback and doing. And so I think to me, that's what I've seen over and over work much better than sort of an academic approach to business or starting a company where you have a perfect strategy or a customer segmentation that you think is amazing, but you're not getting out there, you're not getting in front of real customers. And so yeah, I don't think that there's one approach. And actually, I think sometimes these sort of academic books and advice about business are counterproductive, because
Yes.
there shouldn't be rules or check boxes to be successful. But
Yes.
the more that you can get out there and do and get that feedback loop, the more successful you're going to be. And it can also be difficult to take that first step, but that's really where some of the magic and the learning happens.
Yes, and you said that feedback loop. I think that's really, really key. So, Jen, like I mentioned before, we came on air. That we I think what we kind of need here in Pensacola is kind of like some momentum. To kind of get the ball, rolling really fast. And, with our startup ecosystem here, there are a lot of good resources, a lot of people trying to help startups, organizations and stuff. So do you have any advice on how we could kind of speed up the momentum here on growing startups?
Yeah, it's a great, and I talked to Jonathan a little bit about this. It's a great question. I think a lot of the building blocks are in place. So now there's some pretty exciting accelerators and pools of funding that are out there. I think that making sure that people are aware that these pools of money exist, and that you don't have to have this fully functioning business to go out and get them. And anyone can be a successful founder, and just really thinking about, what do you want to found? How do people react to it? Getting that initial data is really all you need to get going. So I think the more we can spread sort of awareness of what that looks like and these programs, we'll really be on our way to just, I think, increasing the size of the pie and getting more people into this ecosystem.
Yes.
But it's exciting to see all these programs. And I think Pensacola is a great place to start a business. It's growing like crazy, and there's just a lot of exciting stuff happening. So it's been great being back here and seeing all the momentum.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll let you, you can hang on while we sort of wind down here a little bit. I wanted to announce our second quarterly pitch competition coming up in May. The application, we basically only have 2 weeks. The application deadline is 4:30. And we're going to actually pick, let's see, we're going to pick 5 founders and expiring founders. And we're going to have a first place prize of $700 and a second place prize of $300. But for the folks that are already in our pilot cohort, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to pick 5 of those people as well. But those folks that are in our pilot cohort, we use this, Jim, we use this framework called Startup Rocket, and it helps guide them through the steps to going from that idea and to the MVP. But it's also requires them to do all that validation, like you were talking about, and so that's kind of to help enable them a little bit, since we don't have as many the tight networks here where people can learn from each other really good, and kind of as a support system there. But and and for
this is awesome. I want to hear the pitches now.
Yes, and yeah, we're going to do it on May 13th, and so the deal is what we noticed the first time, and we actually got 37 applications the first time. We just did one $2,000 thing, and we're going to try to grow this thing to about $5,000 each quarter at least. But what our strategy is just to try to put that carrot out there to encourage people who have ideas to start working on them and get them into the ecosystem. Yeah.
That's great. This is such a great program. So thank you guys for having me as a speaker, and I'm sure I'll stay involved. I really want to see some of these pitches now, and continue to help people who are trying to take their ideas to become companies.
Yeah, and so it's really amazing, and what's some of the ideas that the folks have here. But I think the key thing that we need to do is help them figure out how to make it more scalable, and so getting them thinking about that, and I've seen, if people are willing to listen, this is their really opportunity to get into the ecosystem and grow their idea into a good MVP. And I did have one story last week. Amazon Web Services, they had a startup day thing, and so one of our founders was listening to that startup thing and so they had an offer to submit your idea for an MVP, and so if they select it, they would actually help you build the MVP. I'll actually even build it for you on their show. And
cool.
That was Tia, and she actually she applied and she got a response back, and so she's waiting to see if she gets selected. And so it's just amazing, all the neat programs out there. And I know Google has so many programs as well, and it's just amazing the abundance of stuff that's out there.
There is, yeah, and I can look for some of the Google resources specifically and send them out after this event, because there are some good resources out there.
Yeah. So do you is it okay to share your presentation with the audience?
Yep, definitely.
Okay. All righty. Sounds good. So Jen, thanks a lot. You definitely made our month, our day, or whatever you want to say, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right.
Take care. Stay in touch.
Bye, everyone. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.